All right, welcome everybody. Um, we're going to take a look at getting Pygame working today. So Pygame is a game engine built specifically for Python, and it's meant for like 2D kind of older style games, like a platformer like Mario, or maybe a top-down adventure game like The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Those would be all games that you could use a Pygame engine to make something similar to. Um, so, before we get started, it is not something that's built into Python by default, so we do need to install it. So you will be, at this point, whether you're on a school computer or your home computer, it's going to be the same way. First, you should have Python already installed, and then we're going to add this Pygame library. So I don't believe I have it installed in this computer yet, so that I think will be good. So we need to get into the terminal. So that's under the View menu up at the top. So go to View, and you're going to look for Terminal. So I have an old terminal window kind of showing up here. Maybe I think there is a... We can also do it this way as well. If you have your screen a little bit larger, you will see a terminal section show up, and we can go to New Terminal. So we just want like something nice and fresh. Okay, so there's a command that we need to write up here, and this will be posted on Brightspace as well, so you can copy and paste it if you'd like. But Python has its own kind of library installer, and it's called pip. It's the Python package installer. So we're going to write a line that's going to tell the computer to tell pip to install this program. So we're going to start by typing in Python, because that's going to run Python. And then we're going to add a -m, which just helps with, like, I think permissions. I'm not actually sure. But it's something that you'll need to use to make sure it runs on the school computers. And then we're going to say pip. So tell pip to install. And for you, you're going to add this --user, because you don't have like install permissions for the whole computer. So you do need to tell to install only for your user. I want it to install on my whole computer here because I'm at home. So I'm going to delete that, but what I'll leave for you to put on Brightspace, I'll put the user in there. And we want to install Pygame. So it's saying this code runs like this: Python, so run Python. Then there's a bit of a kind of permissions thing to make sure it works. But then it's pip, this is the installer, and we want it to install Pygame. So I'm going to press enter on this, and this should start to run. Okay, so it looks like that I already installed this once before. So you can see where it says requirement already satisfied. On your computer, you'll probably see it like scroll through a bunch of lines pretty quickly. There might be some like progress bars that work overall quite quickly. But now this is installed, and I only need to do this once. So that is good. Okay, so I'm going to just close out this terminal by clicking the trash can. And I'm just going to close this one as well. Okay, so now I want to open up a new file. So one thing that we have to be careful of. So I'm going to open up a new file, and I just need to be careful how I name it. What I can't do is call this like pygame.py, okay? Because when you install a new, like an extension library, it actually is in a file called pygame.py. So if I write another file called pygame.py, the computer gets really confused, and it's going to think that the one that's right here in front of it is the one that you just wrote is the more important one. So it's going to try and use that one instead of the library you just installed. And then nothing will work. That's just what will happen. So we got to be careful with the naming. I'm going to call this, let's call this Pygame. Let's just call this Pygame test. Okay, that will avoid the problem. We just can't name it Pygame because that's the name of the actual library we just did. So we're going to start with that. Okay, so I'll just write a couple of comments here, just what Pygame is. So Pygame is a 2D game engine. I gotta spell that right. It's a 2D game engine specifically for Python. So it's not like a professional game engine by any means, but it is a really good learning platform. Because like there are like professional game engines, like Unity and other like there's like the Unreal game engine. Those are all like they make really high quality games, but they're not necessarily the easiest to learn on. And starting a little bit smaller, something a little more like an indie style game, is probably a better starting point than just getting right into really complicated stuff. So what a game engine does is a game engine has a lot of built-in functions to make your game design easy. So it can help with like collisions, because that's something that takes a while to code if you have to do it on your own. When does one block touch another block? There are things like, physics in an engine is really important if you want things to look natural. And obey physics, like speed up as they fall. That's really hard to code. There are things like timers that are kind of built in, creating text on the screen. These are all things that you can use like a game engine to help with. Okay, so since we're using an external library here, we have to start with an import statement. So we write import and just spell Pygame as it is. So that's that. And then we kind of have to start up the engine. So there's one line of code that right after we import, we're going to say pygame.init, and it has empty round brackets. So this is like init is short for initialize, which is like start it up. So even though we import Pygame, we have to start everything, and it kind of gets the things like different built-in methods that need to run in the background. It will start all those for us. I don't know exactly how Pygame is coded, so I don't know what is involved in this initialize method, but I do know that it needs to set some things in motion first before it can handle what I want it to do. So that's just something we need all the time. So I'm just going to write a message here that this starts the Pygame engine. It is a game engine, so we can say, start your engines. Okay, so one feature that's going to be inside of a Pygame or any regular game is there's a game loop. Okay, so I'm going to write some stuff in between after, but I'm just going to reference that there is going to be a game loop. Okay, and there's a few different ways you can do this, but I'm just going to make this variable called running, and we'll set it equal to true. Okay, and a game loop, might go on for a long time. A user might quit a game, they might play it for hours, they might play it for 2 minutes. So you can't really use a for loop in this kind of situation because a for loop will only run a set number of times. So we have to use a while loop here. So we're going to say while, we're going to say while, and the condition is going to be while running is, so checking, so that's why we have two equals, while running is true. Okay, so and then there's going to be some code to put in here. So this is where all of the game stuff occurs here in this single while loop. It's going to loop through, it's going to do some checking. It will eventually like check for inputs and stuff like that. So this is a really, really important loop. Okay. And then once we're out of the loop, if this ever gets closed, the only reason the while loop would get closed is, so I'm just going to write here, code after this point is executed when the game is over. Okay, so if we're out of the game loop, the game has been like shut down. So really all we need to do is quit the engine. So we're going to say Pygame, and it's the quit method. Okay, so this is built into Pygame. And we just do this to shut down the game engine. This is right before the whole Python file is just going to close. Once you're at the end of your Python file, it's done running. So the last thing we want to do is quit the game. Okay. Now, the way this has been written, there are some gaps. Like we don't have any code in the game loop, but we import the Pygame. We start up the engine to get any background stuff going that needs to be going. Then there's going to be a game loop. once the game loop is finished for whatever reason, then we quit the game, quit Pygame. So we close the library, and it's the opposite thing to initializing it. So that's kind of the basic structure we have in here. Now, because I've written it this way, I do have errors. You can see there's like red text here, red text here. There's a 2, meaning that there's at least 2 errors that I have. And that's just because I've written it a little bit out of order, but just to see the overall structure. I'm also going to do one other thing here, just because it's a little bit shorter. Now, while there's nothing wrong with how I've written this while condition, actually there is, because I think I mentioned in a previous video that I often forget to write in Python. True and false have to be capitalized. So I was a little careless and wrote lowercase t true there. So that was giving me a warning because that wasn't going to work. But so now there's nothing wrong with it. But I can make this a little bit shorter. This condition inside of the round brackets is something that needs to evaluate to true or false. Now, so we can shorten this up a little bit, and I can actually just make this say, whoops, cursor moved on me. I can just make this say while running, and I can even then just remove the brackets. Because running is already a true or false variable, it's a Boolean, running is currently true, so we can just shorten up that code a little bit and just say while running. And that's, maybe it's a little bit less readable, but it is shorter. You can do it however you want, but I'm going to do it this way just because I like the simplicity of it. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to go and kind of get rid of some of these errors. We're going to flesh out this program enough so that we can actually get something to run. Okay. So after we start the Pygame engine, we do need to have some setup variables. Okay. For one thing, we need to know what is the screen size. So when you create something in Pygame, you have to define how big the screen you're working with is, or how big the window you want to be is. So we're going to store those in variables. So we're going to say, we'll call this variable screen, and we'll use W for width. And we're going to set it equal to 800, and this is going to be pixels. So I'll write a comment that this is 800 pixels wide. That's what screen W will be used for. And we'll have another one called screen H, which is equal to 400. And that's going to be it's going to mean 400 pixels tall. Now, I haven't use the right commands yet to tell Pygame to use these values, but these are going to hold that value for me. Okay. To actually create the screen now, we write this this command here. So we're going to create the screen, and we're going to pass in screen W and screen H for the values we want. So we're going to create the screen, and it is equal to, so there's a screen variable. Screen is equal to, now this part here is something, again, from Pygame. So it has a particular spelling. So at this point, like, since we didn't write Pygame, so we don't understand all the little itty bits of Pygame. We just kind of need to understand, okay, this is what this thing is accomplishing. And we're just trusting that Pygame is doing it correctly. So we're going to say that it's a Pygame method, or a Pygame function. So Pygame dot display. So then dot set mode. And then we pass it in. We have to pass it in a coordinate. So there's 2 layers of brackets here. And it's screen width and screen height. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky to see. Now, you see all these different periods here. So really what this means is that we're getting deeper and deeper into the kind of Pygame library. So just by doing anything you get from Pygame, like initialize or quit, they all start with Pygame because it's located in the Pygame file. So everything here, we start with Pygame. So it's in the Pygame file, but then within the Pygame file, there's a whole display section. So every time there's a period, you can think about it as going deeper and deeper into the layers. So inside of the display section, there's a set mode function that kind of sets up the screen. And the set mode function requires 2 variables. It needs a width and a height. So I fed it in a coordinate. It's expecting it as a coordinate. So I fed it in 800 and 400. And I use those variables screen W and screen H to make that work. Okay, so again, you don't need to understand all the nuts and bolts because I don't understand all the nuts and bolts, but you can still see at least glimpses of what it's doing because they've actually made this code readable, right? They didn't have to call this display. They could have called it blah, 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 and it would still run, but I would have no idea what it was doing at that point. So I've depended on them naming their functions and stuff in a readable way so that I can at least get an idea of what it's doing. Okay, so we have imported Pygame. We've started the engine. We have defined, kind of chosen how big we want our screen to be. Then we actually create the screen. And we're going to just do one more thing, because right now, if we create the screen, it's just going to be black. So I'm going to just fill in a color. So we're going to do screen.fill. So it's using this screen variable, which is, has been created now. And we're going to pass it in a color. So it's expecting an RGB value. So it's going to be red, then green, then blue. So I'm going to pass in for now. I'm going to do 100, 200, 200. Feel free to choose a different color if you would like. You can also look up a color generator online and, dial in a really nice looking version of your favorite color if you would like that to be your background. But we are going to now get into the while loop stuff that's happening on the inside. You can see now that I've filled in some things, my error count has gone down to 1. It's still not going to run yet because I don't have any code in my while loop, so that's still a problem. So what we're going to see when we get into here, I'm just going to maybe remove, or no, I'll just make a line. So the first thing that you want to do in your game loop is check for events. So we have looked in a previous lesson that we can use a for loop with a list, and it kind of has a really nice short way of writing the code. So that is what's happening here. So Pygame has already a way of getting a list of all the possible events. So we just need to have a for loop that's going to run through those. Okay, so we have for event. So this is a made up word, right? But if I have a list of events, then each thing in the list is probably called an event. But like I said before in another lesson, you can call this like item, just something really general if you want, and it works just fine. But I do think that event in a list of events is just even better. So we're going to use that. So the list is accessed this way. So it does, again, start with Pygame because it's using the Pygame library. Then just like how there's a whole display section in Pygame, there's an event section in Pygame. And we're just going to say get those events, right? So we're telling Python to get us the whole list of events, and we're going to loop through and see what happens, okay? So this is also a very important, whoops, I forgot my colon to get a code block. So this is also a very important section here where we're looking at the events, because this is going to detect things like, this could, things like mouse clicks, keyboard input. That's all going to get handled here. So all the list of possible events is pretty big, but we're going to be doing things like arrow keys to make something move around, and that's all going to get in here as we look for the different events. But just to get this working, we need a way to quit it, okay? Because right now, running is true, and this while loop is going to run as long as running is true. We need to have a way to quit this program, and that is important. So that's the first thing we're going to do, and that's where we're going to stop in this section here. So we're going to say if event dot type. Okay, so this is Pygame language, but it's pretty readable. If the type of the event that we find as we're looping through them, if we're checking it and it's equal to pygame.quit, all in capitals here. So this is a predefined Pygame method. if they quit, we want to now say that running must be false. Okay. Oh, I made the same mistake again. Capital F. Running has to be equal to false. So if they hit quit, which is like the X, it's tied to the X button in the top right of the window. If that gets quit, then running's set to false. So that's going to keep our while loop from running again. And then we'll kind of get shot down to this last part of the code, which is when the game is over and we close out the program. Okay. And there's just, so I think this will run as it is right now. So let's just try that. You can see all the red text is gone. So I'm going to run this. And it's not showing up on my screen share right now, but I'm just getting a black screen and it just says Pygame window, but I can close it out and that works. That's something we'll kind of show in class. And maybe for next videos, I'll kind of work it out so I can make sure to capture the extra windows that pop up. There's just one other line of code I'm going to add. At the end of every section of the while loop, I'm going to run this one extra line of code that's going to be Pygame, again from the display ones, and we're going to say update. This is important because we're going to be making changes to the screen. You know, if you move someone around, you need to update that. So this just like makes all updates to the screen. We don't have any code that's actually doing anything like that, so it's not something that would make a difference when we run it, but this at least should get Pygame started. So we got our base here where we've got, oh, I mentioned I had a black screen before. So without the Pygame display update, we weren't seeing the green. So if you're doing this on your own, now I get a window and I get that this is a teal color. So now that, yeah, that Pygame display update is actually doing something even with just this small amount of code. Like I said, you can't see the extra screen that comes up, not on this video, but I will make sure to work that out for the next one. Okay, so those are the basic ideas, the structure of the game. And remember, your focus is on reading and understanding, so you don't necessarily need to know how to solve problems, create your own Mario game. That's, you know, definitely higher level than what we're doing, but we want to get the hang of some of these basic things that are used in a game. Okay, but we'll call it a day for this video, and I will see you next time.